Canadian gardeners, cold climate gardeners, and gardeners of the extremes. How are you guys doing today? If you are new around here, my name is Ashley and I am a soil scientist. On this channel, we take that science and we apply it to gardening and plant care. So if you like the sounds of that, be sure to hit that subscribe button down below and let me know in the comments below what zone you are gardening in. In today's video, we're going to be talking about fertilizer, and while this isn't going to be just a single video, it's going to be multiple videos that are going to be put into a series. So it's going to be part of the soil science series, but this is going to be more of the fertility side of things. It's taken me a lot of time to kind of organize my thoughts and think of a way that I can bring you this information on a science perspective and how it applies to you as a gardener, and kind of weed out the stuff you don't need to know and the stuff you do need to know, and just exactly how it's going to flow. The first portion of this series is going to be organic versus inorganic fertilizer. What we're going to go through is specifically the composition, so what each one is made of and how each one is manufactured. Secondly, we're going to go through how each one affects soil health in regards to the microbiome and just longevity of the soil profile overall. And we're going to get into the nutrition it gives to plants, which one provides more nutrients versus less nutrients, and what kind of nutrients it supplies. And lastly, we're ending off with the environmental factors of just using fertilizer in general, whether that be organic or inorganic, and exactly how you can apply those fertilizers to your garden to ensure you are not harming the world around you. I'm not picking the side of organic or inorganic fertilizer. I think both fertilizers have their own merits, and I think the one that you decide to choose is the one that works best for you in your situation. I personally use both forms depending on what I'm doing, and maybe that's because I don't see much of an issue with either one. You can let me know in the comments below what you've mainly used, and be sure to tell me if it's flowers that you're typically fertilizing or if it's vegetables, and if you use different methods for basically different plants. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first thing is composition. So organic fertilizers are byproducts of animals, whether that be waste or the animal itself. It is important to note that in this video, I'm going to be talking about organic as a byproduct. I'm not going to be talking about USDA certified or Agriculture and Agri-Foods Canada certified products. If you want a video on what truly organic means and how those labels that look like this end up on your package, then let's give this video a like. If it gets to 100 likes, then I will do a video for you guys on exactly what goes into having an organic operation. It is intense what these people have to go through. So organic in regards to a gardener, I'm just talking about byproducts. If you're wanting to be truly organic, you would have to make sure your manures and your compost, everything were also organic, meaning your cow was fed organically, it was medicated and treated for illnesses organically, and there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it. So the $3 bag you get from Home Depot most likely came from a feedlot, and those cows were raised just conventionally the way most cows are. That's just the hard facts. Inorganic, when it comes to making this product, it's a little bit different. Big one being nitrogen. So essentially what happens is the producer will pull air into the system and combine it with natural gas under pressure. Air is made up of 78% nitrogen, and therefore that nitrogen is fixed from the air and put into the product. This makes anhydrous ammonia, which I doubt you're using in your yard, and if you are using it in your yard, you're probably off the set of Breaking Bad, because that is how you make crystal meth, and yeah, it's not good, it's illegal, so don't do that. But what happens after that is CO2, for example, is applied, and it breaks it down even further into either a liquid or a granular format. The other two, which would be phosphate and potassium, are both rocks. They're mined from the earth and then brought to a manufacturer, adds acid, for example, to condense the nutrient profile, so then you get a product that has a high nutrient level. Fun fact, if you use just potassium or phosphorus in your garden as a rock salt version, this is considered organic. This is something that organic producers will use and will try. People commonly refer to potassium as potash, Potash is the rock, not the nutrient. So I don't know where that started, that you're adding the nutrient potash, but it is not a nutrient, it is a rock. And there's lots of that rock in Saskatchewan because we actually have potash mines all over the place. So keep that in mind. It is not, the nutrient is not potash. The nutrient in the potash is potassium, and potash is essentially a combination of salt and potassium together as one. What does this mean when it comes to the impact it has on the soil's microbiome? Well, fun fact about me is my undergraduate thesis was actually on the difference between organic and inorganic crops and field management. And in that, I had a main focus on nutrient availability and the effects that each fertilizer had on the soil's microbiome. And through my thesis, I actually found out that there is negligible amounts of die-off of the microbe community in the soil when using an inorganic fertilizer. Now, I know that is contrary to the belief of what a lot of people hold when it comes to fertilizer, but I'll tell you why. The reason why organic isn't inherently evil to the microbe capacity of the soil is simply because you're adding a salt. Salt is water soluble, so when it rains or water falls on the ground, that salt just keeps on getting penetrated farther and farther down into the profile until it hits groundwater. Now, if you're in an area that has a slough or your water table is very high, then your salt concentration is going to be closer to your topsoil and therefore may affect your plants. But in a normal scenario, such as a gardener scenario, that salt eventually will drain out of the profile and be completely out of the reach of the roots. Now, when you initially apply the fertilizer, there is a small die-off of the microbial community, and this just has to do with osmosis. Remember the video we did about fertilizer burn? Well, this is the same concept, but with microbes. We are affecting the osmosis between the microbe and the soil profile, meaning we're drawing water out of the microbes and into the profile, therefore causing them to dry out and die, something similar to what we see when we burn our lawn grass. The same thing happens when we apply an inorganic fertilizer. The time it takes for those microbes to kind of come back into the profile is around 48 to 72 hours. Your microbe capacity is back at what it was before, and the reason for that is simply microbes multiply fast, and you're only going to affect the microbe population in the immediate vicinity of where you've applied that fertilizer, and only if it was applied in high concentration. Because there's microbes throughout the entire profile, which is planet Earth, the microbes eventually just move back in. However, if you are fertilizing every day, bi-weekly or weekly, you can see where that may start to add up. If it takes 48 to 72 hours to restore that microbe capacity, if you are watering with fertilizer 48 to 72 hours, you may start to see a microbe die-off that cannot come back from. So once a week, bi-monthly, monthly are really great options. Something you can try to do to alleviate this if you are doing an inorganic fertilizer setup is use a slow release combined with a liquid or a granular formula, meaning you put the slow release in and then you just do micro doses once a week or bi-monthly with a liquid version. So the soil impacts with organic fertilizer is that you are adding more microbes into the soil, but you do have to think about the rhizosphere in general. So the way that the rhizosphere works and how the rhizosphere works with your plants has to do with what that plant needs to survive. So the plant roots actually will nourish the microbes it wants to grow. Now, that can be bad and that can be good. The bad part is that pathogens and bacteria and microbes that harm your plant have been designed to do well in that rhizosphere, so if you aren't rotating your crops on a regular basis, then you may run into diseases. But if you are adjusting your crops, then this shouldn't be an issue. Same thing goes when you put manures and compost down. If you put a manure that hasn't been aged down, you do run the chance of a harmful pathogen or bacteria being introduced into your soil and then unfortunately into your home. So be careful with what you're using and just make sure that it has been aged properly and composted responsibly. The second thing when it comes to adding manures and compost in hopes of increasing your soil fertility and your microbiome in your soil is that rhizosphere is designed to nourish the bacteria that plant needs, meaning anything that doesn't fall in the rhizosphere needs of that garden will not be nourished and will slowly peter away. So your microbe population will fluctuate with what exists and doesn't exist from year to year, depending on what crop you add or don't add. That's why I encourage things like inoculants or phosphate solubilizers, things of that nature, because what you're doing is you're essentially just introducing beneficial bacteria that are available in the soil, but not in the amount that the plant could really use to thrive in the case of legumes like peas, beans, for example. And when you add an inoculant that looks like this onto your seeds and into your soil, you're just again nourishing microbiome and building that up. Now, if you use a inoculant with fertilizer that is not organic, nothing will happen. You may just not nitrogen fix as much. So you can combine the two. You just won't see as great of benefits. And the only reason being has nothing to do with the fertilizer killing off the bacteria, but everything to do with the amount of nitrogen that is available and just the fact that if the plant has it, the plant isn't motivated to make a symbiotic relationship with the bacteria that is present in the inoculant. Now, if you have been going conventional and you're thinking of switching to organic, there is one thing to note. When you're making the switch, you may have a lag or a stunted growth look of your plant for the first year to 3 years. And the reason being is you have to build up the decomposers and just the natural cycle that takes place in your soil. There is just naturally less microbes in the soil of a conventional soil, and that has, again, nothing to do with the fertilizer. It just has to do with the fact that there's no microbes being added through manures, either green or cow manure or compost. You're just not adding anything into it. So to build those up, there's a little bit of a lag, and that is a lag that some organic farmers on a large scale, I have heard, have had to deal with. And that's just a natural process that has to take place. So if you're doing a switch and you're noticing a little bit of a lag, it's completely normal and it's something to be expected. So plant nutrition. Inorganic fertilizer is like a direct shot of a wheatgrass smoothie extraordinaire. It is going to go right into the main vein of the plant, and the reason being is that the nutrients in these fertilizers are already in a format that is completely available to the plant. That is why the labels on the fertilizer containers, which we're going to go through in this series, every single fertilizer packet and form you could think of, I'm going to give you my honest thoughts on it, how it's made, how it works. But these numbers here on your inorganic fertilizer packets are going to be substantially higher than something like a manure pack, and the reason for that is legally an organic fertilizer company cannot state the potential of that fertilizer. They can only state what is available in the immediate future or the present moment that it is applied to the plant. That is why there is such a difference. Now, because it is available to the plant, that also means that that inorganic fertilizer is incredibly water soluble. So every time you water your plants, every time it rains, you're slowly going to move that fertilizer through the entire profile and eventually out of the reach of the roots. That means you do have to apply fertilizer on a regular basis. That's why they tell you to do it once a week, bi-weekly, once a month, whatever the case is, just follow the instructions on the packet. When it comes to inorganic fertilizer, remember that lag we're talking about? Same thing. We don't have that much nutrients immediately bioavailable to the plant. We have to wait for decomposers to do some of the work for us. However, once they do the work for us and they do make it into a form that is bioavailable to a plant, we want to make sure it's not below that plant root and just going to leach out of the system. That's why we do something called top dressing with manures and compost. That puts the nutrients on the top of the profile, so as it waters, as it rains, as we go about our year of growing, that nutrients will sit on the top and slowly reach through the profile and end up at the roots tips. Kind of cool, right? So that's the difference between the two. That's why you see lower values versus higher values. And like I said, we'll get more into those details later on in the series, but this is just a general overview about the two differences. Okay, last but not least, environmental factors. And yes, there's environmental factors to both types of fertilizers, whether it's inorganic or organic. And it comes down to how much we apply. So there are actual directions on how much manure or compost you should put in your garden, and we'll talk about that when we get to that portion of the series. But there's also rules on how much inorganic fertilizer you should apply. You want to make sure that you're following the mixing rates and as well as how often to apply this to the ground. The reason being is both manures, compost, and inorganic fertilizers, which yes, I can do a video on this. This pro-mix stuff is not organic, sorry. It's definitely not. The reason why you need to follow the application instructions for manures, compost, and the fertilizers is because if the nutrients isn't held in suspension of a manure or compost and it's been decomposed but it's not being used by a plant, or you're applying it to the plant but again it's not being used because you applied too much or too often, or you simply just don't have the biomass or the plant that needs that much nutrient, it ends up into the water system. Now, whether that be the lower water system, such as groundwater, or if it ends up in runoff, which is what will happen in the case of urban gardeners such as ourselves, cement, wood, not a lot makes it into the actual soil profile where we are, it's just the fact, but it will end up in the runoff from the rain or the sprinklers. And what happens is it gets into our waterways that are above ground and it causes something eutrophication. Now, while there are other issues with fertilizers and over-fertilizing and some of the impacts it has on the environment, the big thing is eutrophication, and it is incredibly deadly to both the plants that are in water, but also the fish that are in water. So, regardless of what you're using, you want to be following the instructions and just give gardeners a good name by ensuring that we're not the next headline of horrible hobbies that have come out that are destroying the earth. Just keep that in mind, that you want to follow the instructions. It doesn't matter what you're adding. It's actually a really common problem for feedlots or pig barns, for example, with manure. I know that's an extreme example, but around those areas, they have to dispose of the feces in a certain way, because what will happen is if it gets out of the lagoon or into water system, it'll eventually pollute any lakes, rivers, or streams that are near it, and it will get that eutrophication, which is just the development of blue-green algae in many cases, and it'll hurt the marine, but what do you call it? The marine and water wildlife. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you made it this far, you obviously enjoy me, so hit that subscribe button. I look forward to seeing you guys next time. I am truly excited for this series. I am excited to go over the different products, the different brands. I'm going to be showing you how to identify a nitrogen deficiency versus a phosphorus, a potassium, or a micronutrient deficiency in your plant, and we're just going to go through all of it. I don't know how long it's going to take us to get through it. Probably going to take a while, but I really enjoy it, so I'm excited to give it to you guys. At the end of every video, I kind of want to do a shout out for kind of my top followers and where they come from, so you guys can support them and enjoy them. You do not have to be Canadian to be announced in this. You can be anyone, but I will just say if you are Canadian or American so people have a better idea. If you're a cold climate gardener or a warm climate gardener, there are differences, but there are followers from all over the world on this channel, which is insane. And I love it. I appreciate you guys so much. So today we're gonna talk about Heidi, and Heidi is a mom a stomach cancer survivor, a farm wife, and a Canadian gardener. Heidi, I want to thank you personally for your video ideas, which we are going to do that lightning video, and then just being here since the infancy of this channel. And when I decided to reboot it and reformat it, you were honestly one of the OGs. So if you guys want to follow Heidi on her Instagram, it is called the Gutsy Farm Wife, and on it she posts about all things Saskatchewan farming and gardening and raising a child and life as a survivor of stomach cancer. So go follow her, let her know that Ashley sent you. She'll know who you're talking about, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.